Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to season 2, episode 43 of the Peace Podcast. Just give me the connection between logic and emotion, whatever that looks like. And so, have you ever been in a space where you knew the right thing to do? Like your logical brain had done all the processing and you knew exactly what the studies say and the books say and what logically needed to happen, but your emotions just couldn't get with your logic and you couldn't make that choice. Like, this happened to me before with kids, it's happened to me before in relationship, and so I'm just going to give you those examples because I feel like you can connect with them. So, like, for instance, when you've had a really long day and your kids are talking and talking and talking, and your logical brain says, well, they just want to make a connection with me. They just want to feel connected. So they're telling me things and they're bringing me into their lives. And your logical brain knows that that is something that a parent should do because their kids are trying to make that connection with them. So you're trying to do the thing that all of the parenting books say that you should do, but your emotional brain is like, bro, be quiet because I cannot handle any more external stimuli at the moment. And so you're trying to be patient, you're trying to lean into your logic, and then eventually your emotions just erupt and you're like, okay, stop talking, and so the emotional part of you is not in the same space as your logic is. And I remember one time I went to a therapy session and my therapist and I were talking about like the way that I could not even just reiterate to her, but tell her what I knew to be true about relationship and about what I should be doing in that space. So I would say, I know that communication looks like this. And I know that, when someone's doing this to you, it's manipulation. And I knew all of these things to be true. But in my emotions, I felt guilty if I were to leave the situation because of what the other person was experiencing. So I'm like, well, they're going through a tumultuous time in life. And I get that they don't have the capacity at which to communicate with me in a healthy way. So I don't want to leave in this space. All of this is emotion. I feel afraid to leave. I feel the fear of leaving because I feel like maybe, and this is some thought process in there, I feel like maybe they're going to be able to turn it around once it isn't so hard. And of course, she brought me back into my logic because she knew my logic could make better choices. And she said, but isn't life going to be hard? Like, aren't you anticipating that life is going to bring you some things? And if this person is having such a struggle being able to go through their own situation and be able to communicate with you, don't you think they're going to do that same thing if it's not their struggle and it's yours? And I was like, oh gosh. So logically, I knew she was right. Logically, the research was there. My brain was with it, but my emotions just would not catch up to my brain. And it's funny how that happens, and there's a reason that it happens. Ultimately, when we're making choices and decisions and life is happening and we're resting in that emotional state, we're making decisions that we connect to safety. So our fear is whatever that core wound is. My fear is I'm not enough. So if I can just be more, then he's going to be able to make this change into communicating well later in our relationship. So my fear is telling my emotions that I can do something to change this, right? And because I have that fear, I don't want it to look like externally that that is true, that I'm not enough. Or my fear is that, you know, there's this fear of abandonment, and my fear is that if I do what logically needs to happen, then the abandonment wound is actually true. And so when your emotion is in there, your emotion is trying to keep you safe while your logic is trying to have you do the right thing. And sometimes those two things just can't get with each other because one is thinking that it's trying to keep you safe while the other one is trying to do something that's different, that's not in your same habit pattern. And so, some things that we need to know about logic and emotion. So, Logic watches action and pattern and knows them for fact. So logic does not involve the emotion in there. It's like, okay, this is true. This has happened over and over again. This is fact. And so therefore, I know it to be. Like there is no, but I feel like here's the reasoning behind what they're doing. I feel like, no, it's just here is the fact. And when logic watches fact and action and knows them to be true, then you have to know that when you're in your logical brain, it has processed things in a way that it is pulling out only truths. It's like a little sifter, right? It's sifting out all of the good stuff and taking it as fact, and then whatever else is there, it's like, okay, that's either emotion or it's lies or it's manipulation or it's what, fill in the blank with something that the other person is trying to use. So when you're in, and I'm not saying to only be in your logical brain, so hear me, this is going to take a turn once we get to the end of this, but you have to tap into it. The problem is that when you know, and yet you separate emotion from knowing, you're fighting between your logic and your emotion instead of being able to harmonize the two to make choices. And so your logic watches actions. It knows things for facts. So in the situation where we're talking with the kids and they're just word vomiting all over us, our logic knows that those kids are trying to make a connection, but our logic also knows that we're a bit overstimulated. Like, I've been listening to people talk all day. I don't know if I have the capacity at which to do this. It's sifting out all of the emotion and it's taking things for fact. And your logic wants black or white. So when you start to involve your emotions or embed your emotions in with your logic will reject that thing that's not black or white. The thing that may only be unique to your own circumstance because of what you've gone through as a child. So it's going to say, well, what you should do is this because that's what the parenting gurus say is the right thing to do. And if your kids are trying to make a connection with you, then you should make that connection. When you enter in those emotions of, and though you're overstimulated, you should be able to regulate your own emotions and still give your kids what they need. But when you enter in the actual emotions and you're like, oh my gosh, somebody already always wants something from me. And if I'm doing so much stuff for everybody else, how in the world am I supposed to do self-care? Those thoughts that come in that are based in emotion and core wound, your logic is rejecting that because it's like, well, that doesn't even make sense. That's not true. That's just something that you're entering in there. Well, if you make that choice based on what your logical brain says, you have to suppress or get rid of emotions if you haven't healed those emotions, right? So again, not saying to make all these decisions in logic, but if you are making all of your decisions based on logic, then you have to be able to, in your logical brain, pull out the fact that you're either suppressing emotions or you're really good at healing them and you've healed that wound of yours. The third thing is that logic avoids emotions because emotions are not safe to feel. So your logic will say, well, we're not going to feel that because that's going to take us out of what the facts are. We're not going to feel empathy for this person because that's going to take us out of what the facts are. It's going to want to pull you away from your emotional state and go into that logical state. And it's going to want to tell you, well, these are the facts. This person can only deal with their own heartbreak and life things. They don't want to give you any parts of what they have to help you adjust and move through life because there isn't anything there. And that isn't conducive to a healthy relationship. Full stop. It's not going to want any of this stuff over here that you're pulling in because that's not safe to your logical brain. You putting all of these variables inside of what the studies and the facts say, your logical brain is going to be like, nope, not doing that. So here's the thing though, if you're able to process and give other people the logical answer, but when you're by yourself, that's not the decision you make, then it's because you're trying to deal with the emotional part of it all on your own, which is what I was doing with my therapist. It's like, I can tell you everything that's the right answer. Give me a gold star for knowing all of the studies and the right answers. But when I go home, that is not the answer that I land on because I'm sitting in my emotions too heavy, even though I know the logic. And that is, in fact, what she ended up telling me, was that I had to bring the emotions to her because giving her all of the logic that I knew was not helping me process the situation, because you're not going to just be able to act in that logical brain all the time, because at some point, no matter if you're stuffing or not, those emotions are going to rise to the top, and then they're just going to be so big that they're going to overcome your logic, and you're going to scream at your kids and say, please stop talking, I can't handle anymore. Because even though the logic is there, your emotions are so suppressed that they're going to come out as unregulated. And that's just the nature of always operating in the logic and not allowing yourself to be human and feel, because you are human. You're not a computer. Your brain might know all the Google facts, but you're still not a computer, and you have feelings attached to those things. But logic, this is where we're going to start to embed the two. Logic is incapable of just moving. No matter how you deal with your emotions, you are going to get hung up on them at some point. They're going to enter the scene at some point because you're a human being. So when you're going through the process and you're like, logically, this job doesn't work for me. Logically, this job isn't paying me enough. Logically, my boss is toxic, so I should leave the situation. Then your decision is to leave. But wait, you're human, right? So Chat GPT might have spit out that moving forward plan, but you have emotions tied into there. Fear that if you leave, that you're not going to be able to afford the lifestyle that you need. Fear that there isn't something better out there for you. Fear that something's wrong with you because you can't handle the things that the boss is throwing out to you. All of these things are usually rooted in fear, and a lot of that fear comes from that core wound that you experienced as a kid that says, I'm not enough, I'm going to be abandoned, I need to just produce more, I need to just deal with more, I need to just be the peacemaker in the situation, I need to just be a fixer, right? So your logic will not be able to make all of the choices. In fact, it's usually tethered to the unsurfaced or unearthed emotions that you have suppressed deep down. So there has to be a blending of the two. Now, when you're thinking about your emotions, and we have a ton of them, and I never like to label them negative or positive, because the reality is all emotions are welcome. It's just that you have to use your emotions as data to really tell you how you're feeling about the experience and what truly is happening. So emotions will root themselves in the wounds and in some sort of negative feeling that you have toward yourself. And I use the word negative because it produces negative results, not because the emotion is negative. But when you're thinking about the logical parts and then you pull in your emotions, I feel guilty, I feel fear, I feel shame, I feel blame. All of those are emotions that root themselves in your core beliefs and core wounds. So let's go back to that relationship that I was telling you about, where he was dealing with his own things and he expected more from me, but he wasn't giving me anything in the process. My emotions were guilt. I felt guilt around not being able to give him what he was saying that he needed. Now, logically, when I looked at that situation, I knew that what he needed to come from his mommy. And it didn't need to come from me. And I'm not saying that to be ugly. It is fact. When people are dealing with abandonment issues, a lot of times what they expect from their partner is really what they wish they would have had from their parent. And I did not have the capacity at which, and no one person would have in that space, because there were too many voids in his emotions. I did not have the capacity at which to give him what he needed, because I wasn't the who that he needed it from. And so my guilt was rooted in my core wound of not feeling like enough. And so my emotions were saying, oh my gosh, you should be able to give this person what they need. If you were a good partner, you would be giving this person what they need. I can't believe that you're in a space again where you're not giving the person what they're requesting from you and requiring from you. And I'm just going to continue to be in these same spaces, interfere over and over and over again because something is wrong with me. All of those emotions were attached to that core wound. And so were the other person's, and so are yours. This is why your logic avoids that, because it's not safe to go into the spaces where your emotions are going to defy logic, right? So maybe I don't need to leave. Maybe I just need to give him more of me. And in another relationship, perhaps that would have been the answer. In this relationship, it's not. It's not the answer. You know, there may be sometimes where your partner is going through something on their end and your logic tells you, well, if this, then this, so they should be doing this. But your emotion says, that's not yours to handle. Only be there for, you know, though it's hard to watch somebody go through this, only be there for the things that you're asked to be there for because your empathy is too big. So your logic and your emotion are doing this balance where your logic is like, I know all the things, and your emotion is like, I feel empathy, but I also feel myself being overwhelmed by this. So you're creating a balance there, and you stay and you can become supportive because you can also deal with the emotions of it being hard. And that's where the balance is important. Now, your emotions are going to cause you to be in a space where you cannot make a decision or choice because they fear the choice, because they think that a bigger emotion is going to follow that choice. So it's like, I already feel guilt. If I know in my logical brain that this is what needs to happen because this is what's actually going on, and my emotion feels guilt, but then also it would feel freedom and a freeing feeling if I were to leave the situation. But yes, those things are true, but I don't want to deal with the heartbreak and the bigger emotion that's going to come after I leave this situation. So they kind of do this little negotiation where it's like logic knows this, emotion knows this, and now emotion is negotiating with itself. It's like, all right, right now you feel overwhelm and guilt and a little bit of fear. Over here, you might feel heartbreak, and that's going to be a bigger emotion. Which one is safer? So we're going to pair up with the logic that eliminates that choice that would have a bigger emotion attached to it, a stronger emotion attached to it, one that's going to make us feel more pain. So we're going to try to use our emotions to make logic instead of just taking the facts as they are. And that's when you start to analyze what the person is going through so that you can attach your emotions to the logic of what they're experiencing as opposed to attaching your emotions to the logic of what you're experiencing. So that's when you'll increase the empathy and you'll start to try to uncover their core wounds so that you can, you feel bad for them because they have been through this, experience or whatever it is. And so then you say, oh my gosh, only a horrible person would leave somebody who has experienced this. And you take your emotion away from the actual experience that you're going through. So that's why that happens, because your emotions are trying to pick the safer emotion, and then it finds the logic to attach itself to. Well, it can't attach itself to the logic that you've experienced, because the logic that you know is that if a person is treating you this way, and if you feel this way, that it is time to get out of that relationship because it feels abusive and manipulative. So it attaches itself to their logic, because their logic says, but they've been through this and they've experienced this, and so therefore they need more empathy. And so your emotion says, well, if I just want to stay in a space where all I feel is guilt and fear because I know how to deal with this, then I'm just going to take that logic as truth. What happens is you suppress the knowing, go back to your therapist, you have a conversation, you realize how stupid that sounds because that logic is not truth to your truth, it's that person's truth. And then you realize that because the logic that you've already brought to the forefront is there, this person does not have the capacity at which to be in a relationship with one person who doesn't just focus all of their time and attention on them. Then you have to reason that the bigger emotion of heartbreak is what you're going to need to feel, even though your emotions don't want to feel that bigger emotion. And like I said before, emotions are always going to overpower logic when it doesn't feel safe. externally, when it feels like somebody's going to hate you, somebody's going to really actually think that you're not enough, somebody's going to tell a story to other people where they might assault your character or think that you're not enough, and you don't want to deal with that. So how do we mesh the two? The only way to connect them is to allow space, both of them, and let them both have a reasoning power inside of the decision. So it's allowance and it's choice. It's saying, I allow myself to know these things to be true. I give myself the space for my emotions to rest and exist in that same space with that logic. And I can make a choice once that's over. And that's why you'll notice that your algorithm starts to change as it relates to the experience that you're going through. Because the more videos you watch, the more you're building your fact knowledge. You're like, oh, that's what that is. That's gaslighting. Okay. Oh, that's what I need to do. Gray rock. Okay. Oh, that's manipulation. Oh, these are narcissistic traits, right? You're building up your logic because your logic wants your emotion trusted enough to come over here and believe this to be fact and to deal with the fact that that might hurt, but that it's going to get us past this point, right? Your logic wants you to know that in the car with your kids, right? It has the space to tell you, yes, these are all the parenting things that you should be doing to make a healthy child, but also you deserve for your emotions to meet you there. And you can say, hey, listen, love that you're telling me stories about everything that happened to you today, and that is amazing that you want to share all of this with me. I need 10 minutes for us to listen to music, then can we come back to this story? Because your emotion of overwhelm deserves to be in the same space that logic is, and that's when you get to make a choice. You get to make a choice to take a mommy break for 10 minutes because you don't want to yell at your kids, because you know that on the other side, if you don't choose overwhelm in this space, that there's going to be emotional dysregulation if you don't listen to your logic, and you're going to explode. And so if you find yourself in that space today, and this sounds like woo-woo therapist stuff, I promise you it's true. I promise you that if you really sit down and you think about right now the situation that you're in, write down the logic, write down the emotion, and let them participate in the conversation in the same capacity, what you're going to find is that your logic is trying to take you away from your emotion and keep you in the fact space, which means that you're suppressing the emotion if you do that. And your emotion is trying to take you into the logic that justifies another behavior because that allows you to stay in the emotion that you know. But when you merge the two and give them the space to actually be and exist and accept that as the truth of what you know and how you feel, you will find that allowing those things and respecting that that is how you feel, no matter if it's attached to your core wound or not, and having a choice to say, I need more healing around this before I can be in this relationship, or I'm not willing to keep putting up with this same situation over and over again because it's not good for me, because you've considered both things, your logic and your emotion. If you're in that space today, I would encourage you to continue to consider yourself. Don't suppress your emotions. Don't only listen to what the gurus are saying. Put those two together and see if you can make some sense of both of those simultaneously. If you need somebody to help you through that process, certainly reach out on all my socials. Carrie Nicole _. And also, if you found this video helpful, I love that for you, but also I would say that knowledge gained and kept to yourself is selfish, but shared with other people is going to help all of us break free from the bondage that we've been experiencing. So go ahead and click that like and subscribe, share this video with somebody that you know that it will resonate with, and I appreciate you guys for listening. Don't forget to tune in to the rest of my videos for this week.